Hey YouTube, Extra Mayo here, and today I want to deviate from my normal style of content to talk about Toxic Rain leveling. I know a large chunk of the PoE population are looking at playing Toxic Rain as their league starter, and with the recent changes to Pathfinder, which has historically been a very good ascendancy for Toxic Rain, a lot of people are excited to jump in and try it out. However, I see some issues with the new Pathfinder early on, and because of that, I'm personally going to start as a Raider and then respec to Pathfinder later on in the game. So this video will be a quick Toxic Rain Raider leveling guide to help those who are interested in doing the same thing. Now, everyone knows that Raider is a powerhouse early on. You get permanent onslaught, phasing, almost half your spell suppression, and permanent frenzy charge generation. There's so much quality of life here, it's hard to ignore. However, old Pathfinder actually used to be able to contend with some of the nodes of its own. There used to be a node here that gave attack and movement speed during the flask effect, which was kind of a poor man's onslaught. It was comparable. And then there was a node here that gave chaos skills, AoE, and damage, which was a very good early game power boost for damage. But now that both of those are gone, I personally see Pathfinder as a late game ascendancy that can't really compete with Raider in early leveling anymore. Now, my plan is to respec from Raider into Pathfinder once my red maps are completed, and I want to move into the end game content where permanent flask uptime is nearly unbeatable. If you feel the same way, I invite you to continue watching for a brief rundown of how to level this character through the axe. So let's start from the beginning. Start at level 1 with Caustic Arrow and use that all the way until level 12 where you have access to Toxic Rain and you can make the switch. Okay. Now first you want to path through these projectile nodes, and both Caustic Arrow and Toxic Rain have lines on the skill gem that says modifiers to projectile damage apply to the skill's damage over time effect. So that essentially turns these into damage over time nodes for our build. Then we'll move into Aspect of the Eagle for attack speed and damage over time. We'll grab the life, and then we'll grab the mana and attributes for early on. For Act 2, we're going to just beeline straight up to Hunter's Gambit, which might be one of the most overpowered damage over time bow nodes in the game. For 3 points, we have 16% dot, 20% dot, and then we've got 10% chaos dot multi, skill effect duration, 25 dot, really efficient damage. We'll go ahead and take the area of effect mastery, and then we will take the life nodes nearby. This is what your tree should be looking like near the end of Act 2. In Act 3, it's all about damage, and more damage. So let's path up here, grab the chaos damage over time multiplier wheel. We'll go ahead and grab attack speed, damage over time, skill effect duration, and then more chaos damage movement speed. Also in Act 3, a couple things of note. Number 1, we need to make sure that we add our first aura, which is Purity of Elements. This will help with our resistances, and we will no longer have to worry about elemental ailments. You should be resistance capped at this point, but if you're not, just go into your hideout and use any extra orbs of transmutation that you have to fill your gear suffixes with the resistances that you need. Before you fight Dominus, go ahead and go do your first lab. As a Raider, for our first lab, we're going to take Rapid Assault, which gives us permanent onslaught. Then we'll go ahead and fight Dominus with res cap, onslaught, and all this early game damage. The fight should really be trivial. In Act 4, we're going to start by picking up Blood Siphon here for some life, and then we're going to move to the left side here, and we're going to move all the way through these nodes, picking up some incidental spell suppression, but really we're moving towards these skill effect duration nodes. Skill effect duration is a very important stat when you're scaling the damage on Toxic Rain. We want as much of that as possible. Now, after killing the boss in Act 4, as the quest reward, take Withering Touch and put it in your totem setup. Now, bosses are going to be a joke moving forward. In Act 5, we'll go ahead and take this mastery first for even more skill effect duration, and then we'll take this very efficient one-pointer here for 10% all res. This is just in preparation for the first negative 30% all res penalty you're going to encounter when you kill Kitava for the first time. Now, this is what your tree should look like after you kill Kitava for the first time. Now, starting Act 6, before we continue with the tree, there's something very important that I need to mention. Make sure the first thing you do is go to Lily in Act 6 and do her optional quest, which will unlock her as the vendor for all skill gems. Up to this point, Raider has not had natural access to discipline, and the only way to get it was to do the optional library quest in Act 3. So at this point, you really need to just go and buy discipline and start leveling it in your offhand for later, and we're going to need it for when we finish Act 10. For our skill tree, we're going to take the charisma wheel here for mana reservation efficiency, and then we're going to path up the right side of the skill tree here and grab the life and the plus 50 life mastery here. For Act 7, it's pretty straightforward. We're just going to path up through these intelligence nodes, which is actually kind of nice because that will help with the gear requirements and gem requirements as we level them. And we'll go ahead and grab 15% increased max life here, a little bit of attributes and strength in Written in Blood. In Act 8, we're going to move immediately down to this spell suppression wheel, and we are going to grab a new mastery that has been released in patch 3.21 here, which the second half says plus 8% chance to suppress spell damage while phasing. Raiders everywhere rejoice. That basically means 1 point for 8% spell suppression, since most raiders are permanently phasing. Next, we're going to be adding our second aura. So we already have Purity of Elements. Now we're going to be adding Grace as our second aura. Before fighting Solaris and Lunaris, which are the act bosses for Act 8, make sure that we go do our second lab. And when we do our second lab, we're going to go ahead and come in here and we're going to pick up Quartz Infusion, which is 40% chance to suppress spell damage and phasing. And this is where you're really going to see Raider just take off. This is why I chose Raider instead of Pathfinder, and you will feel how strong it is moving forward, because now we are permanently phasing, permanent onslaught, ailment immune, and suppression capped in Act 8. Any leftover points you have after this point, we'll just go ahead and start dumping them up here towards the atrophy wheel. Moving into Act 9, we're going to go ahead and finish the atrophy wheel and move into this wheel here, which is influence. Now, one optional side note that I like to start doing in Act 9 personally is I like to start going to the Rogue Harbor, which is where you do Heist, and start buying lockpicking contracts. Now, every time you level up, the vendor who sells lockpicking contracts will refresh his inventory. So I just go there and search lockpicking in the search bar, pick any of the ones that are there, and start stacking them up. Some people like to do the same with demolition contracts if they want to start snagging jewelry for their chaos recipe. Me personally, I don't like doing chaos recipe, so I'm just going to do lockpicking for the raw chaos and call it a day there. Now, our skill tree is basically set up. The rest of the points that we get, we're going to save for our Act 10 respec. Now, moving into Act 10, one little trick if you're still having slight mana problems. So, after saving Bannon from the rooftop for the first quest, Lonnie and Town will offer you a flask as the quest reward. So, go ahead and select the Divine Mana Flask as the quest reward. And up to this point in the campaign, it's really common to have around 20 or 30 alterations. So go ahead and take those alterations and just spam the flask for the enduring prefix. And that'll basically solve all of your issues for the rest of Act 10. Now back to our skill tree. We're going to put 2 points here near our start location in preparation for our respec. Before going to kill Katava, we're going to do our third lab. Our third lab will be here, Avatar of the Chase, which will double the effect of Onslaught on us, making us move and attack even faster. And the reason why we do it before we fight Katava is just because it's easier, because we don't have that second negative 30% all res penalty, so it's just a little easier on you. After you kill Katava, we're going to head and conduct our respec. Now, up to this point in the campaign, based on the quest that you've been doing, you should have anywhere between 10 to 16 respec points. So we're just going to go ahead and use some of those natural ones. You don't have to spend any money on Orbs of Regret. We're going to go ahead and respec 6 points. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now with these 6 points, we are going to go up here and we are going to pick up this mana wheel with the new Mana Reservation Efficiency Mastery, and we're also going to move into Eldritch Battery. Now, the discipline that I was talking about earlier is going to come into play here. When we select Eldritch Battery, we're no longer spending mana on skills, we're spending Energy Shield. But our character doesn't naturally have a lot of Energy Shield. So how are we going to get a large chunk of Energy Shield to use to spend on our skills? And that's where Discipline comes in. Based on the 2 reservation wheels that we have with Influence, Charisma, and this new mastery that was introduced, we're able to reserve 2 50% auras and Discipline. So in our case, it's going to be Purity of Elements, Grace, and Discipline. That's going to give us about 400 flat energy shields. And then that's not including what we have on our gear. And that will allow us to go ahead and spend that energy shield for attacks. So by the end of Act 10, you should be permanently phasing, permanent onslaught with double effect, spell suppression capped, ailment immune with no mana issues. And this is one of the main reasons that I love to play Raider. Now at this point in the campaign after killing Katava, I usually have about 10 to 15 lockpicking contracts saved up. Now what I normally do is I just take about 30 minutes to go run all the lockpicking contracts that I picked. It's super fast because we have permanent double effect onslaught and phasing, so we just run through the heist very quickly. And I open all the chests and realistically come out with anywhere between 15 to 20 chaos. So it takes me about 30 minutes. I get my first 15 to 20 chaos. I buy a Quill Rain and a 5-link, and that will literally carry me through all of my white and yellow maps until I need to purchase my next upgrade. So that's it. Hopefully this leveling guide was helpful for you. I highly recommend leveling as a Raider over Pathfinder, and then respec your Ascendancy later on. It's so much quality of life that you'll be glad you did. I've added a POB in the description with the leveling trees step by step. I've also added some follow-on trees for basic endgame tree progression, if you're curious. But honestly, this is really just intended to get to around levels 90 or 95, where we'll eventually make the switch to Pathfinder for all those late-game Flask shenanigans. Hope you enjoyed. Stay tuned for more content in patch 3.21, and I'll see you all in the next video.